Hi, everyone. I think people will get in a few, keep on getting in, but in the meanwhile, maybe we can just introduce the session. Welcome everyone for tuning in for this second event in this series of online encounters entitled Despite and Because on Politics and Poetics of Collaboration Across the Mediterranean. I'm Chiara Cartuccia, I'm the visiting curator at UNIDEE residency programs, Città dell'Arte Fondazione Pistoletto. I'm the curator of Neither on Land nor at Sea, Meeting by the Mediterranean Impossible, which is a composite project taking form across a series of residency modules, which are hosted by Città dell'Arte in Biella, Italy, as well as through a program of public events that happen both online and off-site, to which today's talk participates. I want to give a couple lines about Despite and Because, just to frame what we are doing today here. Despite and Because is a series of monthly online talks that seeks to inquire into ways of organizing and commoning in the arts, bringing to the forefront some of the experiences that are currently inhabiting and activating Mediterranean spaces. It invites curators, practitioners, and facilitators from art organizations and projects that operate or have originated in the broader Mediterranean region to get together, so to discuss ways of practicing, curating, researching, caring, struggling, anything in between, within and through institutional, para-institutional, and collective settings. I am delighted, very truly overjoyed to be joined today by Noua Ben Yabdri, founder of Mahal in Tangier, and Sari El Fairouri, founder of Tajarrod in Benghazi, Libya. I think I'm going to tell you how things will unfold today. There will be two presentations by Noua and Sari, and afterwards we will open for conversation and exchange with the audience and between the speakers. I will now go ahead introducing briefly both speakers. And also, I remind you that the chat is open for your comments, questions. We will go back to them afterwards, after Sari's presentation. So the first speaker is Noua Ben Yabdri. She is an independent curator, founder and director of Mahal, a non-profit organization whose mission is to respond to and accompany the needs of the emerging contemporary art scene in Morocco, from its headquarters in Tangier. Noua's curatorial practice focuses on the reflection and conception of projects around issues related to the development of art spaces, institutionalization, procedures, mediation outreach protocols, and the impact that these spaces have on their environment, as well as the study of contextual factors that influence the conception of the terms and dynamics that unfold through these processes and places. These efforts are conveyed and put into practice through the programming of the independent space Mahal, also known as Mahal Art Space, and Silent Pedagogies, a program that questions the curricula of artistic training in Morocco and analyzes the relationship of art spaces with the different audiences it hosts and works with. Sari El Fairouri is an interdisciplinary architect, artist, curator, cultural manager, and writer based in Benghazi, Libya. Through historical archaeology and social spatial interventions, Sari's work is dedicated to developing radical spaces of critical learning and acting within the context of Libya, in brackets, and beyond. Sari is the founder and director of Tajarrod, a pedagogical design-led research practice. Tajarrod's projects vary between the production and theoretical writings and investigations, exhibitions, workshops, as well as the organization of public dialogues and competitions. So the first one to speak today will be Noua. So Noua, the floor is yours.
Now, can you hear me? Yeah. So, well, thank you very much, Chiara, for passing me the mic. And thank you very much for the invitation. And I would like to seize this opportunity to also thank Clara and Elisa and the UNIDEE residency program for setting up this meeting. And I guess, and all the other behind the scenes work that they do. and the Città dell'Arte Fondazione Pistoletto for supporting your so relevant proposals, Chiara. Well, my name is Nuha, and as Chiara said, I am an independent curator and the founder of Mahal. And Mahal is a word in Arabic that refers to a store, a storage, space, or it can even be used to refer to a home, a foyer. So that's something important that I wanted to highlight at the beginning. And yeah, I would like to tell you a little bit of the story or the history of Mahal, which actually started in 2016. During the first half of that year, I renovated by myself, or not actually physically, but with my own personal means or funds, an apartment that is located in a neighborhood called Iberia in downtown Tangier. It was, and it is still, more specifically located in the basement of a building from the 50s that has been built by Italian architects. And one of the major works that we did during the whole renovation process was to widen a window that was already available at the apartment, but we wanted to widen it in order to not only have more light in the space, but also be more physically accessible, at least give that impression, and of course, be visible from the outside, which is something not very common for independent art space or alternative art spaces here in Morocco. So in November 2016, Mahal's programming started by proposing exhibitions, workshops, screening sessions, and presentations. Mainly, it's all started from a personal desire to do things differently, to set up like an alternative space for the local scene that would be more accessible, easier to be approached, and also or mostly to give opportunities to show and share art practices that were more experimental, more thoughtful, and yeah, I would say more aware of history with capital H and current issues. So at the beginning, I didn't have a specific curatorial focus or approach, but through the experiences and time, this started to be defined naturally. The first years of programming were mainly self-funded by personal savings, a few little grants, and the contributions of some of our collaborators all this small amount of money from here and there helped maintain a more or less regular program. However, at a certain point, and in order to be able to keep running our activities and aspire to develop more impactful projects, we needed more funds and a more solid structure. So this is why in 2019, the legal organization was constituted as a non-profit association, which is called Mahal, with capital H, with capital letters, sorry. So I wanted to give you this little introduction to contextualize the whole thing. And now I will share my screen to show you a few images. So let me know if it's okay. Cool. So Mahal has been established as an organization whose, as Chiara said, a main mission is to respond to this, or said differently, to respond to the structure and needs of the contemporary art scene in Morocco by conceiving and practicing alternative way to navigate the challenges specific to the context. So from Tangier's context, and more specifically the neighborhoods and the available resources, the main question that arises revolves around how to transform the fragile sector into a driving force for change. So in turn, it uses its resources to support the development of practices and research projects in various disciplines of contemporary art. So I think, or at least for me, I think it's important to start my presentation or to start talking more in depth about the project by presenting the team, which actually changes and shifts quite often, depending on the nature of the project. However, there are some regular accomplices. This is how I call the regular collaborators, because they are more than that have been involved in Mahal's journey. So from left to right, Selma, who is a translator, who is the gallery manager and mediator. There's also Lucy, who is an artist, a visual artist, and the best for all what is related to production. Well, at least for us. Well, there's also Jessica, who is actually a punctual collaborator and one of the co-founders of ML projects. Here, I would like to say that one of the specificities of our work methodology is that we conceive the projects in collaboration with our partners or with the artists, which implies that with each project, there's a new team that comes up. And then last but not least, there is Mohammed, who is in charge of all the communication related stuff and who is Mahal's oldest collaborator. So the second thing that I would like to share are the spaces and or resources that we have. So in this sense, we have the gallery space that you can see in the first picture with the big window that I mentioned earlier. And this gallery space is the core element from which the whole adventure started, and is the tangible part of Mahal Art Space project that I'm going to present in a few minutes more in depth. So there's also a terrace, which is part of the building. And I mean, we don't own it, but it's at our disposal whenever we need. And this is a space that we have exploited for some workshops, screenings, for some presentations and gatherings, mainly in summer. And it has like a double, it has been used in a double way, in the sense that it's not also to have to enjoy the weather, but also to be more visible to all the neighbors, because most of them have visual access to the terrace. And if there's any music or like a sound, image, etc., they are in a way also involved, whether they want or not. So there's also an office and a shared space, which, well, actually the one that I'm sharing here, is the former one. Now this one it's a storage, but the new one that we have is quite similar to this one, a little bit bigger, and it's in the same floor, always in the basement. Little by little, we are invading the whole basement, which was actually abandoned almost, I would say. And then there's the library. That gathers so far around 500 books and publications focused specifically on art. But we also have novels and essays and all type of publications that we have either inherited or have been donated to the association. And we have found ourselves with random publications that go from old medical books to roadmaps or cooking books and many other weird things that we keep as an archive, and probably within a new project of building like a more established library, let's say, or I would say, which is actually something that it's planned. I think it's something that can be analyzed and studied as something that can be kept as an archive element or not. So this being said, I would like to go now through the content of the organization. And first thing I would like to say is that today the organization develops two main projects, or programs, so Mahal Art Space and Silent Pedagogies, with the idea to address two of the biggest challenges that we face, or that the scene faces, which is the space, or the spaces, and the audience. So Mahal Art Space is an independent and alternative, or more than independent, I would say, alternative space, 35 square meters white cube, dedicated to the promotion of contemporary practices, especially in the visual arts, through a transdisciplinary approach. So Mahal Art Space mission focuses on the invention of new local artistic protocols, to the reflection on art spaces and their environment, and to the different constraints related to the artist practice and the different audiences. So the project is mainly aimed at artists and practitioners who are at the beginning of their careers, as well as the general public. Towards this direction, Mahal Art Space is committed to creating an ecology of practices that connects, in particular, the young emerging arts scene in Morocco, with different audience and communities in the city of Tangier and beyond, as well as with established artists and agents in the field. So I would like to seize the opportunity to share with you where I really located. So this is more, I mean, the city center is where you can see most, more spots indicated, and Mahal Art Space is not that far from there. So we are not in the city center, but we can say that we are still in downtown. And in the picture above, you can see the entrance of the garage of the building, where is actually located the space. And here is the building, some images from the building where we are located. And here you can see some of the gatherings we have organized, and one of them actually is in the terrace I showed you earlier. And here are a few glimpses of the program, of some of the projects that we have developed or organized. So the pictures above are images from previous collaborations. I would like to start from the second one, or the one above from the right, the first one from the right, which is a still from, or several stills from a collaboration we had with Boda Boda Lounge Project, which is an African transcontinental video art project that proposes video art screenings in different locations around the whole continent during the same days. And the first one from the left is a picture from an exhibition that is actually a collaboration we did with a female-led curatorial collective called Calypso 36 Degrees 21. So the collective, for those who don't know it, is named after the coordinates of Calypso Deep, the deepest point of the Mediterranean Sea, located in the Hellenic Trench in the Ionian Sea. So with them, we presented part of the project Out of the Blue Map, which is an itinerant curatorial research program that looks at the knowledge production processes that shape the comprehension of both liquid and solid Mediterranean territories. So here I would like to seize this opportunity to share their website, which is actually I think a really good resource in many ways. Like this way, I can also show you some pictures from the exhibition. Can you? Yeah. So here's the page that presents the exhibition we did in collaboration at Mahal. There were 6 artists selected by an open call, where they were all invited to think and to make it simple in the around notions of mobility, borders, and the in between these notions. So there were, if I'm not wrong, they addressed the call to Moroccan artists, not necessarily based in Morocco, but related somehow to Morocco. And yeah, I'm not going to say much more about the exhibition, but I invite you to go through their website, and even for those who would like to contribute somehow, there's a part of the website where they are gathering resources, different type of resources that are open in both senses for reception and for consultation, let's say. So I will go back now to my presentation. And now the 2 images below are 2 projects that are linked to the second program that will present you. Here, there's an image from the photography exhibition called the Facets of Tangier, which is in the left corner. This exhibition, or Facets of Tangier, was developed or co-curated with Robin Vermeulen and the Amsterdam Orchestra. And the specificity of this exhibition is that it happened during COVID. And with all the restrictions and postponements and cancellation and all that stuff, we didn't really want to go through that. So we tried to come up with a way to present the exhibition and allow interaction somehow between the space and the visitors. And this is how we ended up saying, the exhibition is yours to recreate. We invited in this, and what we wanted to say is that we invited all individuals or small groups of visitors to use the building materials that were there, showcased somehow, and the idea was to invite them to construct their own narrative, or deconstruct the existing ones that were arranged by the others, in order to play with the different functions that the elements that were exhibited, the pictures, the tools, the previous proposals, and even the printed handout that presented the exhibition was conceived in order to be used as connectors, frames, or counterweights, in order to make the visitors or invite them to question their meaning and purpose in all senses. And for the last picture, this was a project called Ma'arid Arada, which is a 3 days public program co-conceived with the collective Mahawalats, which is nowadays composed by 3 artists, Diya Burhim, Ahmed Karmouni, and Mohamed Haiti, that created, and within this proposal, the idea was to create a space for care and conviviality. So to do so, it was, or in addition, there was an exhibition in addition to the 3 days public program, and the exhibition was the fruit of previous experimentations. in which in this case, the main idea was to invite the audience of Mahal Art Space, and more specifically the building's neighbors or inhabitants, to gather around the table, literally, to share a meal, ideas and experiences. Now, as I said, these two last projects were like in a way connected to the second program that I would like to present, which is Silent Pedagogies. So this project has been conceived mainly to address in an experimental way the interactions with the audience and question the mediation protocols applied, generally speaking, in the so-called alternative art spaces. So this project, Silent Pedagogies, first started in September 2019. Which actually was a 2 weeks program, was called Pédagogie Invisible Prélude, that showed an interest in reflecting the modes of transmission in the field of contemporary art practice, vis-à-vis fine art students and artists, but also the audience. So since then, after various moments of theoretical and practical research, the program has evolved under the title Silent Pedagogies, with the intention of integrating into the name not only a way of doing and apprehending the method of transmission, but also of including a cultural notion that is, a cultural notion of the context in which it develops, closely linked to the weight of orality and listening. So here I'm showing so I showed you the program, the 2 weeks program, and these are 2 pictures of a publication, a DIY publication that we did at the end of in one day, actually, at the end of this 2 weeks program, in where we gathered texts, images, objects, testimonials of the participants and the audience and the artists that have been involved in the program. So in this dynamic, Silent Pedagogies becomes a long-term program for reflection and artistic experimentation around transmission and mediation practices, questioning the objectives, methodologies, and impact of actions and activities that often accompany and sometimes shape contemporary creation at both academic and institutional levels. On the basis of this theoretical framework, the mission is to conduct experiments with different audiences and through various forms in order to highlight the fundamental needs of the Moroccan art scene in terms of transmission and mediation, as well as the interests and strengths that are specific to it. And all this being said, I would like to share with you a quick summary of numbers. So throughout these 2 programs that the organization has conceived and developed through the 7 years of existence, we have proposed 20 exhibitions, 16 workshops, and 16 gatherings, screenings / presentations. And these activities have been possible thanks to the partnership and collaboration with more than 40 artists or independent initiative. And I think, I don't know if it's something positive or negative, but all these have been done with less than 50,000 euros. I think it's something that we don't have anything to hide, but it's a fact, and I wanted to share it with you in order to maybe shed some light on the positive or negative aspect of it, where I think they are both, but I'm not sure sometimes how to present it. And well, to end my presentation, I would like to take a small, and I believe relevant promo time to present the last exhibition we are hosting at Mahal Art Space. Well, its title is Imaginations, as you can see, and it's a solo exhibition of the artist Ruben Odoy, and it's curated by Maud Hosseis. So Reimaginations is an ongoing arts and research project that questions narratives and forms of life experienced and invented by the migrant communities in Morocco for their speculative potential in order to imagine collective solution to current pressing issues on social justice, radical ecology, education, urban mobility, and indigenous knowledge. So here you can see some images from the exhibition. And if you happen to pass by Tangier, the exhibition is open until the end of July. So this would be it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nuha. As I said, we move on directly to Sari, but I already collected a lot of thoughts and I'm sure there would be a lot of conversation afterwards. But if you don't mind, I'll leave the floor to Sari now.
Sure.
For his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noha. All right, I will share my screen. Okay. So this presentation is going to be called or titled Tajarrod Confrontations and Maneuvers. And I will get to that in the coming pages. First of all, I would like to thank Clara, Chiara, and Elisa and UNIDEE for organizing this interesting talk, especially with Noha. And I really think that like I'm really looking forward to the possibility of even opening future possibilities of politics, let's say, and poetics of collaborations. To give a context to the Libyan situation, as far as I've been looking at it, so Libya has gone through various political and ideological regimes that mostly centered around the cleansing and destruction of archives and histories, and the reproduction of the political vacuum as a pretext to colonize, civilize, and modernize. This vacuum is, or as what Antonio Gramsci would call the interregnum, came as a result of the Libyan, the constant interruptions and political decay that has been happening. And it's as also like it came as a result of what Libyan writer Sadiq al-Nayhoum diagnosed as the cultural isolation, a phenomenon emerging from a mix of Libyan society's conservatism and its exploitation by the Ottoman, Italian imperialism and colonization. And later, of course, Gaddafi's regime as an imprisoning Orientalist image of the Libyan as an isolated, reserved, Bedouin, backward being. So this is a quote by Al-Hassan al-Wazzan, who is, as many of you might know, a historian, and it's from his book, Description of Africa, written in 1526. So he says, and as such can be said about Libyan people, who are living a tough life, ignoring all kinds of arts and sciences, and preoccupy themselves with the practices of violence and fighting, and they do not refrain from from practicing any kind of villainy. Their life was miserable and wretched, and it will remain so forever. So this is an image of one of the images of how Libya was conceived by some scholars, let's say. So to give an autobiographical context, this is a building. This is a photo taken from a building where I was born and where I grew up in downtown Benghazi, which is now being gradually destroyed by the government as a project of development. And this photo is taken in during World War II, where also the city was subject to enormous damage. And this is an image of the building in front of it from a cultural center in the area, which depicts the destruction that happened after the Civil War, after the 2014 Civil War. And this is the destruction that has been happening now by the governmental project that I just mentioned. So in 2018, I was graduating, and my graduation project was about using architecture and urbanism to revolutionize Libyan space and to have a way of building that is more up to the locals, how they would modify or how they would play with the space and shape it, and build on the architect's design that is supposed to be unfinished structure to be inhabited by the people. And as I think a typical architecture student, I had ambitions of trying to contribute to the reconstruction of my post-war destroyed city, but the reality also was extremely brutal, and I was like completely frustrated at architecture and how helpless architecture was in such situations, as the architect really couldn't do much, obviously, in such a situation. And this is a photo also taken from in 2018, after the war, the Civil War. And this is Omar al-Mukhtar Street, by the way, who is Omar al-Mukhtar, as you know, the leader of the resistance movement against the Italian colonization. Talking about the Omar al-Mukhtar and also this idea of using having a kind of solidarity or using the idea of resistance as more than just a metaphor and trying to imply it in the city with architecture, with art, and with society. This is a kind of a conceptualization, or let's say an imagining of different places in the world that has also Omar al-Mukhtar as a street. So could this be potentially like a symbol of a solidarity around resistance? I don't know, a united cause that could be that could be beyond the metaphor as just a rhetorical thing that's now also, as we know in the art world, is really exhausted. Resistance as something just poetic and helplessly so. In 2018, once I got back to Libya, I was, of course, disappointed in architecture and also the architectural practice in Libya. And this is an office that I went to work with in Tripoli, which in the beginning we had very interesting conversations, and then it turned out that still it's rooted in commercialism and not having any critical agenda. So after endless fights and arguments, I had to quit before I finish a year. And this is like these were the kind of collages or drawings I was doing, and definitely I wasn't thinking of myself as the people who are on the top, but on the people who are pulling that structure on the ground. Like I had doubts about the mode of professional practice of architectural professional practice. And I tried to like figure out a different way of practicing architecture with a critical possibility to tackle societal, social, political, and cultural issues. So also I was being raised on a Sanusi heritage, as like my family has been part of the Sanusi way, and which is a Sufi way, and also which the way that from which the resistance movement against the Italian colonization came. And I was looking at how architecture was used, not necessarily as an architecture, not necessarily as an active building material or concrete buildings, but as a system, imara, as we say in Arabic, as an architecturalization of the human, and also to have a strong connection with society, with politics, and with nature and culture, etc. So these were the Sanusi zawiyas, which are the centers for not only worship, but also political discussions, cultural events, education, and also training the resistance movement soldiers back then to carry on the struggle. And those are 92 zawiyas or Sufi community centers distributed around Libya, which is representing a kind of autonomy, because they weren't related back then to the state, to the Ottoman state. It was an independent, completely independent system. And also it had a new wave in me of like solidarity and kind of collaboration, because those zawiyas also spread in the region. And there were also 90 more zawiyas distributed in Chad, Egypt, Sudan, Tunisia, Morocco, and elsewhere. So architecture as more of a cultural movement. So then I came back to Benghazi from Tripoli, and I thought of trying to figure out a way of practicing architecture and art with criticality. And so the main topic was, like, the main issue was the destruction of the post-war of downtown Benghazi, which has not been addressed yet at the time, and there was a lot of silence about it. And also withdrawal, because the city center was completely abandoned and even feared to be in, because the destruction was so immense. So from there, I had the idea to have this exhibition, a project called Tajarrod, meaning incoherence. And the idea was to think of this destruction not just as a material destruction in the buildings, but also as a cultural and political destruction. So I gathered a team who also felt the same urge that I had, and have been in a similar situation where they saw a disappointment in the discipline. And we thought of doing independent and also collective research around this issue of destruction of the post-war city and its roots, and trying to basically dig those archives and then spatialize those archives in public spaces, so that the community can come in and merge with the artists, with the architects, and that could be then for us, we thought, a temporal counter strategy to the dominating use of the city. And then Tajarrod as an architectural and artistic practice came in, which seeks to inevitably reinventing how architecture and art can be practiced. So it was basically for us an opportunity to have spaces of encounter where the architect, the artist can be more than just producers of aesthetics and rhetoric, but also be in action in those spaces and reclaim them. So some sort of a guerrilla architecture that is more dependent on fluid space and with light structures that can be manipulated, moved around easily. So a question emerges: will this allow us to collectively internalize the historical unprocessed trauma and trigger to open new possibilities of healing, reinvention, and self-discovery and transformation? Can we derive a specific mode of tactical urbanism, of constant fights and flights, to maneuver authority, surveillance, and censorship, but also to confront in other ways. So these are images to show that it's not an isolated office work. It's been physically engaging with the space, with work. And for example, this image, Bushnaf and I, we slept in the car because we had to be there for the installation, as the police who are supposed to provide security weren't obviously reliable. So in a very cold, dark night, we managed to be there for it and for it to be there for us. So we saw this initiative as a micro model, and we're still kind of trying to find the model, like the canon that we can work with as a sustainable practice, which we have not gotten there yet. But it's a model for education as a cultural and artistic practice in the city, becoming a kind of an urban tactic to reclaim civil space, not for propaganda and celebration, but for critical thinking and action. And we say education because the productions period and the research and production period that got this project, that prepared for this project, was a very intense and interesting exchange of knowledge and ideas beyond the academic institution, beyond university or the typical architectural education system. And we thought that this is very interesting because it really gives an importance to get out of the closed spaces, the educational domesticating closed spaces, and get the architect or the creative practitioner to organize in public space. So again, instituting, organizing, not just producing research and aesthetics and rhetoric and ideas. So we had several conversations and we had the exhibition for 3 days in that public space and the historical square called El Silvium, which is also an Italian, by the way, colonial construction. And it was also in this way a layer of critique on that heritage of the violence of the modern Italian colonial project, which we will get to now, like later, how it interestingly relates to the destruction now that is happening, also as an act of modernizing this city. So to have it fostered a space where even just a fragment of the community could bear the scars of this modern violence, recent and past, and the destruction of Al-Khassa Square or Al-Silvium Square. The architect and educator Adrian Lahoud says that this kind of post-traumatic urbanism can give us a way to rethink architecture and urban practice as methods of, or as tools of possible collective healing. So in Benghazi, Tajarrod was a means of collectively recognizing and expressing the post-war trauma through developing counter-narratives, references, and methodologies to produce local knowledge, as Lahoud mentions. So then COVID came and we had to stay home, obviously, and we couldn't engage much. But then we thought that we had to find a different way of practicing, and then we founded Unit X, Counter Territories, to basically develop different ways of collaborating and organizing on a digital front, uniting over the tools of counter mapping, which Edward Said, for instance, talks about this in a quote, or can relate to this quote, which he says, just as none of us is outside or beyond geography, none of us is completely free from the struggle over geography. The struggle is complex and interesting because it is not only about soldiers and cannons, but it's also about ideas and forms, images and imaginings. And we thought that if we can develop an online platform where different creative practitioners can use this counter mapping tool as to develop a unifying imaginary geography where critical learning and practice can happen, and interesting ideas can occur and trigger also different modes of collaboration. So we invited lecturers from different contexts, which provided lectures and an online workshop we organized, where we had in the beginning around 90 participants, but then 90 participants from 45 countries. And then we chose an amount of like we chose the best projects, and we organized an exhibition in Benghazi, in Barah Cultural Center, where it exhibited the counter maps of the participants, which talked about different topics. It talked about their own context, whether in Brazil or in Palestine or in Japan, etc., etc. And in 2022, we started a collaboration project with Mama in Morocco and Philomena Plus in Austria. And the idea was basically to have also a collaboration that can connect the South with the North and develop ways of exchanging critical knowledge. And the topic that we chose was rethinking the heritage of modern architecture in the MENA region. And as we thought that we could have very interesting commonalities, but also differences, especially with the situation in Vienna. And it's an ongoing project. The case study or the studied location we chose was Omar al-Mukhtar Street in Benghazi. So, and also in 2022, we started the Marsh project, Al-Masira, which aimed at starting a research on deconstructing and reconstructing the Libyan value system. And the idea was that since the 2011 revolution, nothing has radically changed in terms of not only the politics, the economics, the social dynamics, but also not any change in architecture and art and culture, etc. And we ask on whose values is the city being built and destroyed. And we did a research. We had participants from different disciplines, and the objective was to research ideological and political texts produced by different political regimes in Libya, and try to see how their values, their political and ideological values contaminated Libyan society and constructed the value system that we are now suffering from, which is fundamentally dominated by extreme conservatism and religious fundamentalism. And the idea was, how could the architect, the artist understand the situation so that they can transform this value system through spatial practice. So this is an event we organized, an analytical, dialogical, let's say, event where the participants were analyzing four documents. One is Gaddafi's Green Book. The other one which is a political manifesto that Gaddafi produced. The other one is the Libyan Constitution of 1951. And then a research done by Libyan Center for Studies, I think, of University of Benghazi, called the Survey on Libyan Values. And the other document was like a combination of many different fragments of of Libya's history and architecture and urban fabric. And the task was to analyze these documents, or let's say archives, and try to link causal possibilities between the text and the city and architecture, and how this related to the value system. So in his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire talks about the idea of the guaranteed space, which is the safe space that, as I mentioned, came from this interregnum, or the vacuum, the political vacuum that you're not, that as a Libyan, you were not allowed to fill yet, like independently with your own critical thoughts and with your own, let's say, autonomy. So which meant, you know, like this guaranteed space meant deactivating the revolutionary aspect of civic space by stripping it off of the element of time. So this is why archiving is very important in relating it to public space, as it makes the possibility of change visible, because this is not really just the situation as it is, but there is history that caused the situation, and history goes on, and there's still like a chance of change. So yeah, by stripping it of the element of time, making the status quo as if the only unchangeable, fixed, permanent reality, leaving us in a state of disavowal from it. And again, this is the idea of kind of spatializing those archives as a critical practice in a public space. And this is as just a symbolic walk, or maybe a mini march, let's call it, in that old city, which this part, by the way, is now, I believe, destroyed. Now, back to Benghazi particularly, it's, as some of you might know, it's been called Asiya culturally, meaning intractable, meaning resistive, resilient, stubborn, a stubborn city. But then the question is, you know, with all of this destruction that has been happening and these events that happened, and also the political passivity that is now in Libyan society, refraining from any protests, any political, social political movement, let's say, for change, and all of that, considering that we have just now been like only 11 years far from the revolution that happened in 2011. So is the intractable city a city of persistent denial and amnesia? Is persistent and amnesia a form of resistance, or is it merely a frustrated survival mechanism? And this is an image of Benghazi's urban fabric. The spots in red, they are the informal, let's call them neighborhoods or little towns that are monstrously growing now out of plan, as we call it, out of the master plan that has been put for Benghazi. So as if like Benghazi's heart, which is the red circle, is destroyed, not only once, it's been constantly being destroyed. So although its heart has been destroyed, it still monstrously, let's say, grew and survived, and is still managing to survive and maybe thrive. I would end with a quote that's been very interesting for me to think of and to reinterpret, by Omar al-Mukhtar, since we're talking about Omar al-Mukhtar Street, where he says, "My death is not the end. You will have to face the next generation and the generations after that. As for me, my life will be longer than the life of my hunger." And what's interesting for me is to reinterpret these keywords. What does death mean in terms of the city? What does now for us to face? Are we the next generation that Omar al-Mukhtar is talking about, or will the next generation after us do the mission? What does a life what does it mean for a life to carry on after it's already dead? And what does longer mean? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sari. Very in-depth presentation, and I think many notes emerged. Yet again, I wanted to remind everyone, of course, you are welcome also to, if you want just to engage outside of the chat, raise your hand and we let you speak. of course, I would very much appreciate, as we discussed in our previous private conversation with Nuha and Sari, if you guys have questions for each other, starting point or notes, comments that came up during each other's presentation, that would be nice to start from them, I think.
Yes, I have, Noha, do you have a question?
Go ahead.
Okay, so since we've also both talked about pedagogy and you have your project Silent Pedagogies, I was thinking of what it responds to, what does it respond to in terms of the educational, like the dominant educational system in Morocco now. It's a general question, but I'm interested in what does it particularly critique about the current educational system, and how does it respond to it?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, well, I think that the response to that question would need like 2 or 3 more hours. And actually, it's well, when I did the presentation and I presented this, particularly this project, I said that it's a long-term project, in not necessarily because we aim it as such, but more because we know the difficulties and the complexities that it entangles, mainly related to the lacks that we find in the educational part. But we wanted to also break some walls between these limits that are imposed by the institutional academic education, the education that we receive in each one's family, the education imposed in a general way of speaking by the society, etc., etc. And we are trying to target like specific complexities or challenges which can also be applied or extracted from the academic education or official education, but also in all the other educational areas. But there is and I think it's something that can be applied for any discipline or any context, which is the huge distance between what is taught and what indeed is applied in the professional real context, let's say. There's also a huge and very complex problematic, which is language, in the sense that in the overall educational system, if you go to a public school, you are mainly going to learn all the subjects in Arabic. Then maybe during, I don't know, from 10, 12 years old till the university, 17, 18, you might have like an additional language, can be French or English, maybe Spanish. And all of a sudden, when you go to university, most probably all the subjects are going to be delivered in French. So there's a huge gap also in terms of language and the difficulties that this arises. And more specifically for the art practice, it's the total absence of what, I mean, of a reflection on what is art practice, beyond the fact of producing a certain aesthetic to be sold, and which is something that is it's something from which many, maybe I can generalize, but it's something from more, I would say many students suffer because they find themselves in a vicious circle where they, even before graduating or as soon as they graduate, they found themselves either not knowing what to do with their degree, or in a gallery that they are in a way exploiting their production, their things, they think in their ideas, without pushing the boundaries or pushing them to develop a certain reflection, a certain research, etc. Well, so these are some of the points that we are trying to tackle. But when we talk about education, now I've presented more or less the parcours, let's say, that will an art student go through. But there's also, I think that the audience is also part of, and is mainly the target of this project. And when we say audience, it's not necessarily a visitor or spectator or participant in a workshop or whatsoever, but we also include the artists, in the sense that when we conceive this audience as a non-labeled mass, in the sense that each person is potentially someone that can deliver or can share a certain knowledge or a certain expertise, without necessarily giving like a specific role for those that deliver a skill or a knowledge and those who receive it. So we are also trying to, deconstruct all the systems in order to see if there's a need to really build a new one, or keep going with this blurry and yet very open and accessible way of doing.
Right, and I think also like the most challenging part is the economic part, because okay, the student can go to this let's say architectural or art school, and then go out and work for a civil society institution, after being disappointed, let's say at, I don't know, the art industry, if there is one, or design, or if they go into architecture, private offices, etc. Then the option to be on their own, and start their own critical initiatives. The question is, what kind of self-generating income mechanism will they develop? And for instance, in your situation, Mahal Art Space, you mentioned that in the beginning it's been all based on self, so it's like a sacrifice, like a personal sacrifice, self-savings, and also with the uncertainty of will this model succeed? Will it survive? Will we survive? And what do you think? Like the option? What do you think will? What options do you think does a student has once they graduate and they also start their own movement, or they start their own practices, alternative practices, let's say, as you did, for instance? Would you say that you could generalize a model or methodology of sustaining such a practice?
Well, I believe and I hope that there's an option, or there's a possibility. I would say that the ideal is that no next generation has to do a sacrifice, but for sure there's, or at least that's what we, and when I say we, it's me and Mahal or other initiative of this kind. We are aware that we are doing some sacrifices, but in order to not, or to avoid starting from scratch each time. And in terms of economical model, let's say, I think that there's, or I would like, or there's an idea of starting one of these days another program that would focus only on that, because I think that it's very complex. And what it's for sure, at least for me, is that there's no, not only one, or shouldn't be one income source, but a more diversified one. And in that sense, even though we can say that we are not necessarily adhere or support industrial capitalist or big companies' way of doing. I think that part has done a lot of studies and a lot of steps forward in order to take the most advantage of how to build an economical model that will not only allow you to survive and keep going with your activity, but try to get even a certain benefit, which in our case, it will be something that would be, or I hope that will be invested in new generation, new projects building and trying to make or help a bigger context or a bigger ecosystem to get involved in this case in a sort of virtual circle. And to go back to your question, specific question about well, I don't know if you asked, but there's the question that how a student can make a living, or an art student or architecture student make a living without getting into this practices or endeavors in where commercializing what is produced is the main or only objective. I think that for sure, there's something that has to be done throughout the years of learning or training or as a student, and not necessarily waiting till the end of the degree or the master's or whatsoever to start thinking about that. And more specifically, well, I don't have an answer yet, but I know that it's something that should start way before finding yourself having to make a living. I would like to look for a job to make a living.
True, and I think also collaboration in this context is very important because it gives a lot of chance to learn, from other structures.
And also develop these activities. I mean, for our case, I would say, well, thanks to the collaborations, we have been able to survive for 7 years. And of course, and not only we learn, but through, I mean, one collaboration brings another, gives more visibility. I mean, what we earn, let's say, or what we win as a benefit from this collaboration is way more beneficial, I would say, than the financial part. Which doesn't mean that we have to work for free or pay for our staff or do this type of sacrifices. That's another thing that we're trying to work on, and to. I mean, even with the art students, we feel that sometimes we have to work on this idea, on deconstruct this idea of the bohemian artist that is a flaneur that and lives a bohemian life, and doesn't need money to live. I lost the thread of my thought. Yeah, well, I was talking about collaboration, and that, for example, is something that they are not aware about, the fact of doing collaborations in an early stage of their thinking. I wouldn't say even practice. It's crucial for any type of development of this, I mean, of projects in our cultural, in a cultural artistic field.
Right, I think it's also very, very important, like radically important to like send it the other way. So instead of beside having a structure or a method for the student to find after graduating to practice critically, alternatively, and also sustainably, it's also very important, I think, to try to push for this model or for this methodology, let's say critical pedagogy in the institution, and try to collaborate with the institution so that it makes the process smoother, so if they move from an educational context, that the typical educational context, with more and more, let's say, critical practice and research into different modes of instituting and organizing, where they have also, as you mentioned, which is very interesting, as one of the methods of transmission, as orality and listening, for instance, instead of dictating And yes, so when this happens and the student gets out, then it's another process. So yeah, but then also the architecture. Would you say that the educational program, the educational system in Morocco is still very traditional, very didactic, uncritical?
I think we can't generalize in the sense that I think it depends on who is delivering the knowledge or the subject, or who is directing the school. But it's true that I mean the institution itself is still very much linked to the colonial past, in the sense that many of the laws or the texts or the instructions of the way of delivering a certain curricula is almost a copy paste from the French educational system. So in that sense, I think that there is still a long way to go. But then I think that there are some key figures that have started shifting a little bit how things are done. But still, I mean, I feel that Morocco now, it's in a accelerated moment of evolution in many ways, and things are happening very fast. So that those key persons that have achieved something, they took like, I don't know, 20 years to do so, and at a certain moment they had to retire, let's say. And then there's, I believe, or from my perspective, I think that there's an issue, or there's a yeah, I would say an issue with the new generations, with the students, in the sense that, I don't know, I don't feel that they want to take the lead from those who are leaving. I don't know. There's something wrong that we have started discussing lately, but I don't have that many answers about this last point that I raised.
Right.
I was wondering.
If I may,
yeah, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to relaunch the conversation the other way around. Now I was curious to know who are these groups with whom you are working. With Tajarrod, and who is not. Well, I use the word audience to respond to certain criteria, but I don't necessarily like the word. So yeah, I would say, who are the people with whom you work? Who are your accomplices?
Well, the main target, I would say, would be art and architecture students. So this is like the direct one, and then there is a broader circle of cultural actors and general creative practitioners and writers, and also then civil society actors. And why? Because, and also like students, mainly because we saw that there is an important problem with the educational system in Libya, because historically, now it's like, I can almost, well, I don't want to say generalize, but then we can say that the dominating educational system is a patriarchal, traditional, censored, conservative system that doesn't allow for political critique at all, and that it doesn't allow for creative research to a certain degree without also censoring it and didacting it or dictating it, let's say. And yeah, so this relates also to our discussion about the root problem, the historical problem, because in after the Italian colonization and independence happened, so after 1951, there has been a very strong, of course, pan-Arab and Islamic rhetoric, and then there was the injecting of the Islamic Brotherhood movement in the country, and then we had pioneers of the Islamic Brotherhood movement go into the educational system and playing important roles as teachers, as managers, etc., and then consequently injecting their Islamic fundamentalist ideology, which, like by nature, doesn't allow for challenging the power structure and challenging dominant narratives, be it social, political, or also religious. And then it carried on, of course, with Gaddafi, with his brutal censorship, etc. So now we have this possibility of the educational institution to kind of try to reconstruct a different model, through engaging the student, not necessarily, by the way, an architecture or art student, but this is like the direct one, but also students in general, let's say university students, so that we can give them a possibility of, or give them an example of having a possibility of engaging with the city, and organizing, first theorizing and organizing. They have been very important processes for us to critically theorize and have a space to freedom to freely do so, and then take that theorization into an organization in public space. It can be through a public dialogue, or in a design space in an exhibition. So this is the link that we find. If we can really work on and restructure, we can really contribute to a very important change, let's say, in the educational system.
Thanks. Chiara, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, no, because I kept on taking notes, and two things kept on emerging. Of course, is about, many times it's been repeated, about making space or creating spaces for encounter or for possibilities even. And of course, also this last thing that you said, Sari, about to arrive to a point at which this self-organization also can gain even a space of freedom. And in general, I think even more than that is possibly a space of independence, because this is also contributes very much in terms of the means and the structurings that you are always, as far as understood, of course, in your presentation and knowing your work, you are somewhat, it's necessary to create these alliances and the system that allow you to be independent fully, because the kind of discourse also you want to produce, and the kind of, let's say, the kind of audience also you want to reach out to, need to be reached out without having to subdue to certain systems that are truly in place and are preventing for this to being easy, let's say. I'm wondering about going back to the question of audiences, because you said, of course, what are your kind of alliances at the very moment, accomplices, as you said, Sari, but what you can imagine, both of you, as your future audience, what you can imagine if you start thinking about the future of both your organizations and your projects. What kind of audiences are going to emerge as things go on?
Well, if I may, well, the answer that I have for you right now, it's based on what I've seen so far, which is a sort of, and I didn't realize that till you asked the question, which is like a raise of artists from those community of artists that were the regular audience that we had, and to which we were addressing our program mainly, the one of Mahal Art Space. And then, of course, there are other people that are here from the space or from the program, those who are just passing by, those who are looking, and they pass by because they have a certain interest. And by the habit, taking this habit of visiting or coming to the openings, discussing with the people there, feeling or having this sense of community, of artistic community, I have the feeling that they felt legitimate to first think out loud and develop, and through sharing out loud their thought, their reflection, their ideas, I think that little by little they were able to develop not only a reflection but a certain practice that at the same time were able to share with this community in where they already felt they are in. And yeah, I believe that the future audience for Mahal Art Space, I believe, will be younger, even younger artists and self-taught artists, which I think it's great. At the end, I mean, the artistic practice that is intended to be developed once you have your degree, from my perspective, I think it should be, it should start before having the degree, which is, so it means that if you consider of these young people consider themselves or start developing and start a practice at a younger age, that is something that we are implementing in a way. And on the other hand, if there are self-taught artists, let's say, I think that can be representative of these movements or these undercurrents, as we have discussed it one of these days, these movements that arise in a silent way, you know, through our proposals, through our gatherings, through our discussions or presentations. Things are happening without necessarily noticing, or not necessarily in an explicit way. So that would be really great. And in terms of silent pedagogies, I can tell you, but thank you very much for the question, because I think it can drive drive us to new paths to research on.
Interesting. Well, for us, I think like we have been a bit suspicious of kind of continuing or being imprisoned within let's say a sense of localism, or like to practice locally, and without before we know it, we then have some kind of an imposed nationalist identity on us, you know. So as we are also very critical of, as Tajarrod is kind of mainly working on, you know, like trying to generate ideological critique, we're obviously also very critical to nationalisms. And therefore, we thought that it would be also very interesting in regards to the security issue that the issues that we are facing in Libya, that it may be more sustaining to establish a practice abroad, like outside Libya, and then consequently add to the Libyan audience an international audience, or a regional and an international audience, to kind of find different way of generating a cross-border collaboration and solidarity, so that we sustain ourselves kind of in a safe way, not in a safe way, like we develop a counter strategy to the security issue in Libya, and to basically be able to articulate and research critically without having the threat of being imprisoned or violated in Libya. and also connect with other causes and other issues wherever we might be relocated in. And then also that doesn't necessarily mean that it will prevent us from organizing in Libya, because we can still in different ways still organize and practice in a relatively safe way. But it's still a question that we haven't settled, we haven't resolved fully yet.
Thank you so much. I invite yet, I'll give a last invitation to join in the conversation if there is any questions, because already we arrived 1 hour and a half of your time I took out of you. So it's like we can go to a closure. I don't know if you have any other curiosity for each other or something also for the expansion of the sake of this conversation. I found it extremely interesting for me to have you to just listen you talking and picking up on some notes from each other, because I really think that's an interesting space to facilitate this kind of encounter on issues and problematics you may share or even not. It's not necessary to have an overlapping in order to engage in a meaningful conversation. And so I thank you very much for your generosity in that. It's been brilliant for me. So yeah, just if you have any final notes, or the audience, I feel like it's pretty absorbed with the listening side of engagement, which is still perfectly fine. Otherwise, we just say bye and enjoy the evening.
Not from my side so far. Well, yes, but maybe I'm still.
Maybe.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you for your talks. It was very interesting. I just want to, like, in the theme of the talks was about Mediterranean. So I would like to ask if in your practice, in your different practice, there is a more large discourse around Mediterranean, and in which way you develop this, or in a specific way, or you are more open, maybe also outside of this specific space. Don't know if it was really clear, but just like about Mediterranean, are you
If I may,
you find yourself and your practice inside a specific way of a specific geographic and cultural space? Thank you. Don't know if it was clear, but
yeah, thank you, Camila, for your question. If I may, well, I will answer. Well, I would give you an answer. Hope it will fit your expectations. But from our side, from Mahal side, at the beginning we were confronted to this challenge of trying to find this curatorial approach in where we had to defend and advocate for a specific theme, whether it's post-colonialism, feminism, mobility issues, migration, etc., etc. And then we realized that there are not many of us, in the sense that we couldn't afford the privilege to focus on a specific theme, but rather try to work very hard to create a space in where first we can gather, second, be able to listen to each other, and three, even if I don't believe at all on this concept or notion, try to create the safest place possible in many ways, on many levels, even if I think that it's an impossible task. Well, not impossible, but it's important to try to achieve it. But yeah, well, in any case, that's not the point. So I was saying that because at a certain point I realized that there are many issues that we would like to tackle, but we cannot. So by trying to open the space to different collaborators that come up with their specific researches, we found ourselves, for instance, presenting this exhibition or this project that were specifically focusing on the Mediterranean and different notions in terms of philosophical, economical, political levels, which was the one out of the blue map, with which we presented an exhibition and also did a book presentation, or the book presentation, the presentation of the book that they worked on, the book and the catalog, in fact. And then there's this last exhibition that we are presenting in where Yemo, who's a Ghanaian artist based in Morocco for quite a lot of years now, I think more than 15, whose work address mainly issues related to the migrant communities, being himself one of them, even though he has stabilized his legal situation, but yeah, he works towards mainly the cultural aspects and the stories behind these communities in order to also escape or present other or give visibility to other narratives that go beyond the victimization of these communities and these people, because it's not only about a community, but it's about individuals and individual stories that they carry throughout all their journey wherever it leads. But yeah, to go back to the short answer, no, we don't tackle specifically the aspect of the Mediterranean or the aspects of the Mediterranean Sea beyond it, geographically speaking. But yeah, given the specific location of Tangier and the history embedded on the fact of being geographically located in that specific area, there are many layers that connect us to this question. But I would say that we don't necessarily tackle them in an explicit way, unless there's a question or there's a project or a collaboration that tackles it in a frontal way. That would be my answer.
Thank you.
Sarah, you want to add something?
Yeah, I would also say that like it hasn't been a project that we necessarily worked on, but recently this has very interestingly emerged. And as I said, we had a project called the Placeless Academy with our partner Mamma from Morocco and Philomena Plus in Vienna, and it was basically as I said, the idea of rethinking the heritage of modern architecture in the MENA region. So the regional or the geographic situation, more than just a geographic, I would say we are also interested in looking at it as an ideological imaginary constructed, and to think, what does it mean? So for instance, the Libyan architectural situation, the Libyan situation in Libyan cities, let's say, for example, the Italian colonization, when it came, it looked at Libyan architecture, vernacular Libyan architecture as a product of their own Roman Mediterranean heritage. And there is also, like on the other side, there is an identification, for instance, in Libyan culture with, and I think also in our neighboring countries, with the Mediterranean identity when it comes to with clothes, with food, with music, etc. So with the UNIDEE residency that I just went to recently, curated by Chiara, which was an extremely interesting experience, it triggered also for us interesting questions that we still have to figure out, you know, as this cultural, political, and ideological construction that is still now going on, the idea of the Euro-Mediterranean. And we're interested in how this the contemporary project, or how it is still going on in a contemporary way, how it relates to the Libyan city, you know, and how we can trigger or develop a new critical research on it, basically.
Thank you so much. I think. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I think
wanted to thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it opens up the possibility of other 6 hours of talking. It's very grounding for all this, my process of thought. So I'm not, I don't think this is, I'm very grateful for your answers, Noha and Sari, because I think you encapsulated many of the things that I would have answered myself. So thank you very much, both of you, of course, for engaging in this conversation, being very generous in presenting your projects and your artistic, architectural, curatorial, pedagogical practices. Thank you, Clara and Alisa, for facilitating all of this as usual, and the participants for their presence here. We will come back with other events in the coming months, so keep an eye on this space, and see you very soon. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care and good luck.